Okay, I just turned it on,
so you can touch it.
we
Put
can
on
edit
off.
it later.
Yeah.
All right.
Can you see
Let me just
yourself?
see if we can see me.
Oh yeah, we can see you.
Okay.
You're looking
Let's
good.
see. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Should I hand the mic over to you and you want to give it a go?
Sure.
Okay. Let's say.
Greetings, everyone. So, as Rusty, I am so sorry. I knew that was going to
That's
happen.
Rusty, I'm Peter.
Oh, Peter. Okay, that made it even worse. Gentlemen,
Oh, I'm sorry.
as the gentleman kindly introduced me, my name is Avellina Balestri. I'm an author and editor from Maryland. I usually do consider myself from Penmar, though, because I'm in Tawny Town, so right over the border of the Mason-Dixon line. So, you know, I'm one of you in heart. I have been involved with the SAR in different ways over the years. I represented Maryland in the Sons of the American Revolution National Orations Contest in Greenville, South Carolina. And more recently, I was interviewed on the SAR podcast, Revolutionary War Rarities, in which I talked a little bit about my trilogy of novels set during the American Revolution, particularly the religious test acts that were administered during the period, which is an aspect that's quite prominent within the trilogy. So that's a little bit of my background. So with regards to my trilogy, it's called All Ye That Pass By, and it follows the journey of Edmund Southworth, a fictional character who I have set in Lancashire, England, in the north. He comes from a Catholic recusant family. So recusant, the word means one who refuses, and it was a term used to describe anyone, either Catholic or dissenter Protestant, who refused to take the test acts, essentially acknowledging the king or queen as head or governor of the church in England. And so these took various forms since Henry VIII broke with the Catholic Church. You had the Oath of Supremacy was the first one, and following up after that, again, it took very, very many different forms. In the 18th century, these came under the general penal laws of the period, and so this is the position that Edmund's family finds himself in, that they are refusing to take these test acts. And what that means is that his family, although they come from very good stock, they're basically an old noble family, descendants of knights, they still are cut off from being able to participate in all different avenues of society. So they are not able to vote, much less actually run for some sort of public office. They are not allowed to attend the prestigious universities, you know, that existed at Oxford and Cambridge and all these places that where typically young gentlemen would go. They, at various points, are not allowed to own weaponry or horses. And there's an interesting little story, not to get too off the track with it, involving General Thomas Gage's family. So he, of course, was the British general most famous for the eve of revolution kind of lead up in Boston and so forth. Well, his family was very famously recusant Catholic until his father and his father's cousin essentially broke down and took the test acts because the government said, that's it, we're going to confiscate your horses. And this was like the end for them. And they said, no, we're gonna sell the farm, essentially. And so that's what they did, and that's why you see Thomas Gage in the military, because his father and his father's cousin had decided to do that. So Edmund in the story, as a young man, when we meet him in the story, he's 18. His father has recently died, and the family is in financial straits because also if you're a recusant, you're going to have to be paying tithes and taxes on this for not attending Anglican services. So there's a lot of pressure on the family to conform in all different ways, societally and in terms of monetarily. And ultimately, they nearly lose their ancestral home, which already is quite broken down. It doesn't have the staff to run it, and it just hasn't had upkeep because of the money situation. So they have their home saved, however, by a historical character who comes into the sphere, who was an old friend of Edmund, alias Ned, his father, General John Burgoyne of Saratoga fame. So he was a parliamentarian, a member of Parliament representing Preston in Lancashire. He comes from an old family of Lancashire landowners, and even though he is born in London and spends a lot of time there, he still commutes back up to Lancashire. So he has a lot of ties up there, and Lancashire is the county with the most Catholics in it in England at the time. So Burgoyne, because he was friends with Edmund's father, helps them get out of the monetary situation, kind of takes Edmund under his wing, and takes him traveling with him a bit down to London and elsewhere, and they bond. So through that connection to Burgoyne, we see Edmund meeting quite a few figures who are going to become prominent in the American Revolution, including having a brief meeting with King George III, for that matter, through Burgoyne's connections, a sort of a garden party situation. But he also meets with General Thomas Gage, who we indicate may well be a distant cousin of his, because requisite families like intermarried like mad, so very likely, in fact. And Major John Pitcairn of Dispersey Rebels Lexington fame, and Earl Hugh Percy. So he meets a number of these figures who he overhears during these meetings discussing the situation across the water, the situation in America, in the colonies. And they're having debates among themselves, because in Britain, opinion was just as divided about what was going on in the colonies as it was in the colonies itself. So you have these people who are really kind of grappling with essentially how the empire should be run. Should it be falling back on a sort of, well, we are the mother country and they are the colonies, and we can directly tax them and so forth. They are subordinate to us, and that's just the way it is. Or are they more sort of progressive, if you will, in their views, and thinking, well, no, we should make the empire more universally representative. And actually, the colonial grievances are legitimate, at least to a point. And so we get to see, and Edmund gets to hear some of these debates going on in Britain itself between these figures who hold different views, even people in the military, people who will be famous for trying to put the rebellion down. They still have different opinions, and some are actually quite sympathetic to the initial colonial grievances. So that goes on, time passes, the war actually breaks out, and you have news coming in from across the water of what is happening. Things are getting much, much more heated and ultimately bloody as news comes in of Lexington and Concord, of Bunker Hill, and so forth. And you end up where, Edmund is just becoming vastly more aware of what's happening, to the point where when Burgoyne, who went over, by the way, before Saratoga, before he becomes famous, he had been over in America during the Bunker Hill situation, during the siege of Boston. And then ultimately he also serves up in Canada at different points. So he was already in North America, before he then, ends up getting his plan, his famous Albany campaign plan, sort of greenlit by the government. And so this is when Ned and he have a discussion about where Burgoyne is presenting to him, hey, do you want to come into the military with me here on my campaign as an aide? Do you want to be an aide to me on this campaign? So at first, Edmund refuses. He's a recusant. That's what they do. So he's a recusant. He says, because he knows that being an officer in the British military involves taking the Test Act. So it's the thing that all of his ancestors have refused to do. But even though he initially says, no, I can't do it, my conscience will not allow it, different circumstances start to press in on him, and peer pressures start to influence him. And ultimately he does. He caves, he takes the Test Act, with a great deal of guilt involved, but he takes it. And so then he is now a lieutenant in the British Army now, and he ends up as an aide indeed to General Burgoyne on Saratoga campaign. So this is how he ultimately ends up in North America, and in the American Revolution. So over the course of it, I'm not going to go through it all nor give it all away, because I would very much like to buy it. But suffice to say, over the course of the disastrous campaign for Burgoyne, Edmund is really forced to grapple with so many levels of his identity, which up to this point have been extremely strained, because of the nature of how he came into the British Army to begin with. His sister, who's a fairly prominent character in book one, basically tells him essentially, if you do this thing, you know, the color of your uniform is just going to remind you of the wound in your own soul. So, you know, he is living with that. He is living with that. And no matter how hard he tries to sort of say, well, I'm doing it because I'm trying to prove myself to my king and my country, and I'm trying to let everybody know I'm not a coward or I'm not a traitor and all of these things, ultimately, he can't help but be conflicted and start to question the nature of these allegiances, the nature of, well, you know, what is the greater good and the lesser good here? How far does allegiance to one's king go, actually, at the end of the day? Where is the cutoff point? And he again has to grapple with that through this crucible experience of the war, and really question where his identity and his allegiance lies at the end of the day. And in the process, he also meets quite a lot of different characters. It's kind of implied in the title of All Ye That Pass By has a few meanings. One, it's a reference to the biblical verse, implying the sorrow of the experience in many ways. And indeed the sorrow that Catholics went under during this age of persecution, but also it's talking about the people who pass by in his life. So he, in the process of the war, ends up meeting various people who are sympathetic or indeed very actively fighting for the cause of American independence. And this will have various, you know, impacts on him and in the wider story, particularly the character of Abby, who he ends up in a relationship with for a while, through a lot of different stress circumstances. But that inevitably what's happening is that there's sort of a mirror effect of a civil war. That he is brought into, and that's basically what the American Revolution is. You have people of the same ancestry, kindred, you know, blood, language, you know, just so many culture, heritage, religion to given extents, obviously, but, you know, Christian. And so you have a situation where these people who just a little while ago were, of course, fighting together against a common enemy, in the French and Indian War, for example, are now fighting against one another. And it's a very emotionally raw and painful experience for many, many people on both sides of the conflict. So he finds that that reality of this conflict is very, almost like, again, a mirror effect of what he's going through with regards to the struggle of his Catholic faith and his identity. It's an Englishman, which is constantly being called into question. So all of these things, because again, you have people in America also having these complex questions of, well, what does it mean to be an Englishman at first, and what does it mean to be an American? How do those two identities overlap? Do they? Should they? You know, and then the question also of how far, like, does religious freedom go in this new world versus the old world, and all of these types of questions. So that generally is the summary of it. The three books, the one that's actually published is Gone for a Soldier. The second one, which I almost have finished, I'm very hopeful of getting it out by Christmas, but we'll see how that goes. I don't want to be Gentleman Johnny 2 on this one with the, we will have it by Christmas by the King's Head, and it doesn't materialize, so put a caveat on that. But the second one is called Kingdom of Wolves. Hopefully it will be out sooner than later. And then the third will be called Blood of the Martyrs. So that is where we are currently. And what I'm going to do now is read some bits and pieces, excerpts from the series. So I'm just gonna pull it up there and see what I have going. So maybe what I should do is start, again, to comment on sort of the Civil War elements of this thing. is a scene where we have a character who's reflecting. It's the character who's in the British Army, but his mother was colonial. His mother was American. He was born in America and raised there until he was around 9 or 10, and then was taken back to the mother country after his own mother dies, and he's raised there by his British-born father in England. And so he has this sense of being caught in the middle of things, even as he is, in the British military now as an officer, and he's trying to sort of square the circle of that complex identity by being very much of a recruiter of loyalists. He's being used in that capacity. But he reflects in this sequence upon his memories as a child with certain characters from the French and Indian War, and people that he has encountered. So when he was quite young. So I'm going to start by reading that because it makes sense chronologically, even though this is actually an excerpt from the second book, Kingdom of Wolves, but because it's a flashback, it kind of makes sense. So there we go. The character's name is Richard Vaughan, and he becomes prominent in book 2. So anyway. In the last war, we fought together as one people against common enemies. My father served as a quartermaster for General Edward Braddock during his ill-fated campaign in Pennsylvania. I can remember meeting the general when I was just 5 years old, and he was staying overnight at our home. He was a formidable old fellow, a proud veteran of over 40 years, who had campaigned against the French on the continent. He had a sturdy physique, blazing eyes, and a uniform speckled with snuff, the kind he was always chewing to the revulsion of aristocratic officers who thought his common birth made him uncouth. He had a naturally coarse tongue, they complained, and too much weakness for the bottle. Truth be told, though he got the better of the bottle in his later years, he could be mighty cantankerous and sometimes haughty, quick to show his frustration with those he believed deserving of his contempt. But it was said he was also protective of those who he believed to be poorly used by others, and tangled even with his fellow officers if they treated their subordinates in a manner he deemed unjust. When he saw talents in others, he would do whatever it took to hone it in them. He made his true feelings known always, but would not besmirch a man behind his back. He was nothing if not true to himself first and last. Richard smirked mischievously. I admit my own encounter with him brought his temper to the fore. As it happened, he was none too amused when I pulled my little wooden pistol on him as he sat reading Seneca by the fire after supper. Bang, 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 I cried, waving my weapon under his nose, destined to be a soldier even then. He stood up with such a start, his book and spectacles fell to the floor. Then he snatched the toy pistol from me, decried me as an irksome imp, and very nearly put me over his knee for a sound thrashing. A young colonial aide, who was a favorite of the general, had to pacify him, gently reminding him of the importance of diplomacy under the host's roof and rescuing his spectacles from the floor, lest they be trodden underfoot. Then he fetched the general a brandy for his constitution and a cloak to ward off the nighttime chill. It was to all that Braddock viewed that one as a pet. Mind you, he still grumbled about him and swore at him, threatening to spank him too if he proved impish like me, but he could not hide the fondness he had for him. Lucky for me, he listened to his pet's advice that time around, and I was spared corporal punishment. But the aide did give me a stern lecture to never again wave guns, wooden or otherwise, at officers in His Majesty's service, be they regular or colonial. After all, they represented the king's rights amongst us, who dwelt on the edges of the empire, and such rights, he said, reflected nothing less than divine authority. Then, to help the medicine go down, he gave me a handful of dried cherries from his satchel. Wouldn't you know, it was none other than that scallywag, Washington. Damn my eyes! He seemed running irredeemable back then. The listeners laughed. Well, you all know what happened afterwards, at the massacre of Monongahela, which my father was blessed to survive. Poor old Braddock died like a Briton, remaining true to his name and holding fast like a broad oak. 5 horses he lost before he took a ball to the lung. And still he wanted to stay on the field and fight till the savages swarmed in to tear his scalp from him. Washington, meanwhile, rode from point to point with equal courage, as bullets shredded his uniform. He too lost multiple steeds, but always remounting, rallying the survivors as best he could before being sent off to report the calamity at the nearest fort under the Union flag. He helped carry Braddock to a wagon when the retreat began, but the general insisted that if they would not suffer him to stay on the field, they should at least hoist him back up on his horse. He ended up traveling by both means, back and forth, fighting against his own agony each time he was moved from the wagon to the saddle and from the saddle to the wagon. At last, 4 days later, he succumbed to the consequences of his wound and anxieties over defeat, willing young Washington the scarlet sash given to him by his own father, and telling his manservant to attend to Washington with the same care he had shown the general. Some now say the older man should have listened more to the younger one during the ambush, and broken his military formation, which Washington insisted was unsuited to the wilderness. They say Braddock's training and his pride would not allow him to be corrected at such a crucial juncture by a beardless colonial boy. But men of insight have long acknowledged that new ways are required for a new world, and it would do well for the mother to heed the hard-earned wisdom of her children. So that's the sequence from the French Indian War, and again, it summarizes the situation of how, again, just a little while ago, we had this shared experience, which did have some foreshadowing of tensions to come, due to, again, the common belief, shall we say, I mean, among pretty much all the powers of Europe, that certainly colonial subjects were subordinate in all different ways, politically, but also in terms of militarily and how they were, grouping them in their military format and so forth. And so you kind of see that, but you also see that we can look at Washington's letters, for example, and really see how much he talked about, at the time, his own zeal for king and country. And so you see there was a real break that occurred in the way people thought of themselves and the world around them. So that was largely taken, as best I could, from real records from the period of how people described things that had happened and went down and reflected on them. I will break this up actually by singing something. This was my plan originally as a presentation. When I sent it to Rusty, I remembered. Rusty, I sent a clip of my presentation at Fort Loudon, and I had done some singing in between. So I'll sing something. Because my first book is called Gone for a Soldier, I will sing the song Johnny Has Gone for a Soldier. So. There she sat on Buttermilk Hill, who could blame her, cry her fill, and every tear would turn a mill. Johnny has gone for a soldier, sure our ruin, sure, and he loves me. When he comes back, we'll marry thee. Johnny has gone for a soldier. Me, oh my, I loved him so. Broke her heart to see him go, and only time will heal my woe. Johnny has gone for a soldier. I'll sell my rod, I'll sell my reel, I'll sell my only spinning wheel to buy my love a sword of steel. Johnny has gone for a soldier, sure, 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 Lord, sure, sure, and he loves me. When he comes back, we'll married be. Johnny has gone for a soldier, with fife and drum he marched away. He would not heed what I did say. He'll not come back for many a day. Johnny has gone for a soldier. I'll dye my dress, I'll dye it red, and through the world I'll beg for bread. The lad I love from me has fled. Johnny has gone for a soldier, sure, 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 Lord, sure, sure, and he loves me. When he comes back, we'll married be. Johnny has gone for a soldier. Okay, so I have time. I'll try and now swing round to the piece that I was originally going to do, which so this is the piece on Nathan Hale. So give a little background on just context of this. So Abby, I had mentioned. So her story is a great commentary on the tragedy of women in war. Indeed, the situation that many women would find themselves in these, circumstances of essentially being tossed between two armed bodies of men who are conquering cities, and they are struggling to survive in this environment and also to help their loved ones who often find themselves in terrible situations. And so the tragedy of Abby is she's the daughter of a patriot printer in New York City. She starts out quite innocent and very idealistic about this new revolutionary cause and her father is so supportive of, but she doesn't know much about the realities of war as it happens. So in brief, her father is captured by the British and thrown on a British prison hulk, and she ends up the victim of war atrocities and then ultimately being willing to do anything to try to save her father from that British prison ship, including prostituting herself at times to the enemy, because she is so desperate to save him from the terrible conditions of the prison ship. So this is how we end up meeting her, that she's in a sense in disgrace, but she still has these ideals, and that's her tragedy, really. She finds herself in this position. And she's on Burgoyne's march, and this is kind of how she initially ends up connected to Edmund. But so it's this very, very weird situation at first. But what it is that eventually happens is that they do wind up bonding genuinely out of sort of a Stockholm situation mutually, honestly. They both are in a very vulnerable place. Edmund's very guilty. He feels very at odds with himself, very far from home. He feels like, frankly, his moral foundations have been rocked from what he's done taking the test at. And he finds himself susceptible to this kind of relationship, quite frankly. But it's also, even though it's again kind of odd, it still is a situation where Abby, because of the life she's been living, which has been pretty terrible, he's been the first person in a long time to treat her actually as a human being and be kind to her and genuinely care about her and connect. So it's a very imperfect situation, but they do genuinely come and have a shared relationship experience. And she, in turn, teaches him about kind of her side of the story, her experience of the story. Because he's also fairly innocent about the realities of war. It's the first time he's ever been in anything like this. And the experience, again, of somebody on the side of the revolution. So she tells him in this scene about her experience ending up meeting with Nathan Hale before he is hanged. And this is that. Abby's eyes grew hazy. I had heard they'd taken a new prisoner, a spy. He was a young officer from Washington's army sent out to gain intelligence in common clothes, pretending to be looking for work. He didn't have much of a chance, really. He'd never gone on a spying mission before. Some said he was betrayed by a Tory cousin who recognized him. General Howe wouldn't even allow the prisoner to be tried. Once he had confessed to the deed, the orders were to hang him, no further ado. The rules of war, he said, no room for justice or mercy, only death. But I wanted to see the poor soul before the end. I don't know why. I suppose I fancied I could help somehow, little me with my ideals in spite of everything. I had a feeling the old major would indulge me if I played him right, and he did. So I ended up going into the greenhouse of Howe's headquarters, where they had the prisoner locked up. A greenhouse. Isn't that sick? It should be a place only for thoughts of life among green and growing things. At least the prisoner thought, At first, the prisoner thought I was, that I'd been sent to get information from him in exchange for a final few hours of pleasure. He was just a bit beyond 20, and he was afraid, though trying to be brave about it, I could tell. I imagine another sort of boy might have tried to have some fun with me just to distract himself, maybe feel a little more alive for a while through the rush of his blood, but not this one. He told me he wanted none of it, and prayed to God to guard him against temptation. I started to cry. I knew what I was, sleeping with the enemy, but I hated to have him think of me like that, especially because I never meant to tempt him. And I tried to explain that I just wanted to see him because she placed a hand over her heart, her eyes glistening. I was a patriot too, and the daughter of a patriot, and I had not given it up, not yet. A tear shone like a jewel on her cheek, and Ned tenderly brushed it away with his finger. She reddened. You wouldn't understand. I think I do, Ned said softly. Whatever I am, I know what it is to love. She swallowed hard. The prisoner changed after that. He had heard of my father's name and read his articles. I got so excited and told him that I'd helped father write some of them, that we'd have long discussions and I'd make all sorts of suggestions before the pieces went to print. I would always be so proud to see my ideas he included. The prisoner said he believed in the education of women, that his fellows too often underestimated us, and that such a story of mine was proof of it. He said that some of the sentiments expressed in those articles father and I wrote had kept his zeal burning, bright through long months of disappointment and inactivity. He said he had even read excerpts to some of his friends as they perished from wounds or illness, and he would hold their hands afterwards to pray for them in the cause. I understand why you were pleased to hear that your writing had been of comfort to the suffering. Ned tried to sympathize. I don't know if I was pleased or not, she admitted. I rather thought I might cry again then and there, and as he spoke upon it, I thought he might join me. Perhaps it seemed to him the cause was dying, as his friends had died, and as he would soon die, and as my virtue had died. It seemed as if we had come so far and had sacrificed so much, yet it was all coming to nothing. Yes, the dream of America was dying. I said as much, and he replied that true liberty was found only in God, and no matter how many tyrants triumphed or how many shackles were placed upon those who dared to resist here below, the far country promised to us would be our new birth of freedom and our eternal allegiance. Every good thing about America would be refined and immortalized. The dream would be like a jewel in paradise, he said, because of the purity of its conception in the hearts of men and women who yearn for liberty over life. God would honor that, and the blood of patriots, no matter the outcome of the war, would color the gem like a ruby. It is a fine thing to find oneself able to have hope beyond this world, Ned murmured. Abby shrugged. I suppose it is. The things he said were so very beautiful and so very sad. I finally gave in and cried on his shoulder, and he didn't push me off, nor did he cry. though his breathing fluttered. He said it wasn't over yet, even here below. Then he told me things, how his father was a church deacon, and how his mother died when he was young, and how they always taught him to read the Bible when he was afraid and he wished he had one with him then and there. Then he said he hoped his mother would be the first one he'd see on the other side, or maybe somehow she'd come to him before when he was between one world and another, earth and sky, and soften the sting by her touch, because he remembered when he was very small how she would lovingly touch his hair and his cheek. Abby brushed the back of her hand across her eyes. At dawn, they came for him. It seemed so short a time we had together, but also so long. I felt him shivering as he got up. Oh, Ned, I'd have offered my own life in his stead if I thought they'd take it, just to stop his shivering. His voice was wobbly when he asked for a chaplain, which they denied him. Then he asked for a Bible, but they refused him even that. They said he was an unrepentant traitor to the king, governor of the church, and so had cut himself off from its ministry. His voice grew wonderfully steady, and he responded that a far worse treason was against God himself, which they were committing by refusing him spiritual consolation. The soldiers were unmoved and shoved him hard against a wall for his insolence. He asked to write his family. One officer said no, but another said yes. They fought over it as he penned the letters, which then got confiscated or torn up. It was horrible. The look on his face was horrible. But then he started to recite what his parents had taught him, the scriptures he had committed to memory. What verses did he recite? Ned inquired. Abby's eyes took on a haze, as if she were seeing a glimpse of things beyond the veil. Why art thou cast down, O my soul? Why art thou disquieted within me? Hope thou in God. For I shall yet praise him, who is the health of my countenance and my God. I was so moved, I pushed my way through to him and dared to hold his hand and then his sleeve for as long as I could to console him, or maybe console myself. How does one console someone about to be deprived of their very breath? I was so sick over it, I could hardly breathe either. She shuddered. He was led out to an apple tree. When I saw it, I thought he might panic, but he remained serene, even though he was very, very white. I was the one who started panicking when they were pulling him away from me. He turned to look at me one more time, and I thought all at once he was rather pretty with his fair face and blue eyes, and a sort of schoolmaster's intelligence shining through his countenance, because that's what he was before the war, a teacher of children. And he smiled at me with so much kindness, as if to thank me for the company, and whispered, "We are yet children of liberty, you and I." Now she wrung her hands together. A soldier read aloud the sentence, and some nearby Tories started to mock him. One man spat at him and swore, "May God damn your black soul along with your black cause." But the prisoner didn't flinch. He made a little speech to the redcoats surrounding him and the crowds gawking at him, and he told them all that one should be prepared to meet their death in whatever form it came, and he hoped they might be as content as he was when their time arrived. He told them they were shedding the blood of the innocent, and then paraphrased Cato, saying that if he had 10,000 lives, he would lay them all down, if called to it, in defense of his injured, bleeding homeland. Then they made him climb the ladder. As he stood up there, I heard him insisting again, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country." Then they pushed him off before he could say any more. Oh, Ned. I heard him choking and I screamed. Then I was senseless to everything in a swoon. And when I woke up, young Nathan Hale hung there unmoving, like a slab of meat at the butcher's shop or a twisted apple upon a tree. Yes, he had become that terrible sign upon the Bible they would not give him. And filled with the knowledge of good and evil, I threw up in the grass. Ned didn't know what to say. He was too distressed by the thought of her distress, and he hated hangings too, for all their supposed necessity. That night, I paid my debt to the major in his bed, she continued dismally. But I hated him more every second. I wanted to punish him for Nathan Hale, sentenced to hang out there for days as a deterrent. I wanted to end his wretched life with my thoughts, because he was one of them, a killer of my people. He noticed I was crying my angry tears and scolded me, feeling guilty, I think. He said it was the custom of nations to deal thusly with spies and traitors. I screamed at him that I did not care, for a boy had been killed, and all mankind was killed with him. Yes, in one life, all our lives were lost. He muttered that I sounded like his mother, who taught him war was a sin. Then suddenly he demanded to know if I'd given the dead boy my body. He was jealous, the stupid man, as if we were husband and wife. And I told him no, not every man was filth like him. She bit her lip. I wanted him to strike me or something, I suppose, so that I could hate him more. He didn't, though. Then after a while, he said that he knew what it was like to faint the way I had fainted, and feel so broken-hearted the whole world goes black as ink like a little death. I said I didn't believe him. Then he told me a story from when he was a boy. His father was a weights and measures man along the Sussex coast. His mother was a Quaker, whose parents hadn't approved of her marriage to someone outside the Society of Friends. The family was a middling sort, sometimes sinking lower when his father gambled down at the wharves. I suppose it's why the major kept to himself so much and took so long to rise in the ranks. He didn't much fit in with those better connected. Growing up by the sea, his closest companion was his younger sister. She was an angel, he said. She was beautiful, he said. She was like me, like his mother, and felt too much. He said that they would go collecting washed up seaweed and shellfish for soup when money got scarce. They would also climb the cliffs and look for gulls' eggs. He was happy then, he said, happy and free of care. Yes, perhaps back then they were Liberty's children too. But one day she slipped and fell all the way down. He said that he should have run for help. He should have, but her head was bleeding so much and he saw the light in her eyes flicker, and he thought she might slip away from him. So he just stayed and kissed her dear little face, and she kissed him back. Then he was gone, and he swooned on top of her. I think he never forgave himself, even though it wasn't his fault, and she died loving him. She was quiet for a long time. Ned, I don't know what came over me, but when he finished rambling to me, I held him. It shocked me. It shocked him too. He fumbled to hold me back, and he apologized. That is the saddest part. One of the cleanest things the old man did that night made him apologize, but he seemed too afraid to let go, as if he might dissolve into that black ink forever without me. So I let him cling to me like that till morning, and I even fell asleep with his heartbeat in my ear. She looked at Ned for a long while, then choked. Why must we all be so broken? Ned swallowed hard, perhaps so that we might be moved to pity. Thank you for enduring that. And I will hand it over to the gentleman who I thought was heading in my direction. But he went over to the food, which is clearly more interesting to him.
I know, that's exciting.
Oh, good.
Would you like?
I'm trying.
Am I still going? You want me to sing?
Can you give her that? I'm trying to figure out how to.
What's he trying to do? I have no idea. So are you done with your?
I'll do, just to wrap this whole thing up, I'll sing for half a minute. Okay. So, I'm gonna sing a song that was extremely popular in the colonies at the time, and it ties back into kind of where I came in on this, which was the French and Indian War, and back to showing a connection between everybody at the time. So it's A Brave Wolf. It's about General James Wolfe, and it was marked as one of Washington's favorite songs, which is it was a very, very popular song, in the period. So that's not a shocker at all. So Wolfe was the great hero of the conquest of Quebec, when the British take Quebec in 1759 from the French, and so it was a big kind of everybody jumping on him as the hero of the age in Britain and British America, and so that's what this is. So come
all you young men all, let nothing fright you, nor your objection make, nor let it delight you. Let not your courage fail till after the trial, nor let your fancy move at the first denial. I sat down by my love, thinking to enjoy her. I took her by the hand, not to delude her. When I turned to speak, my tongue doth quaver. I dare not speak my mind, whilst I am with her. Love, here's a ring of gold, a long time I've kept it. Love, here's a chain of gold, madam, if you'll accept it. When you this posse read, think on the giver. Madam, remember me, or I'm undone forever. So then this gallant youth did cross the ocean to free America from her invasions. He landed at Quebec with all his party, that city to attack, being brave and hardy. He drew up his men in a line so pretty on the plains of Abraham before the city. A distance from the town, the French did meet him. With double numbers they resolved to beat him. The French drew up their men for death prepared. In one another's face the army stared, whilst Wolfe and Montcalm together walked. Betwixt their armies they, like two brothers, talked. Then each man to his post, and they retired. 'Twas then these numerous hosts commenced to fire. The cannon on each side did roar like thunder, and youths in all their pride were torn asunder. The drums did loudly beat, colors were flying, the purple gold it streamed, and men they are dying. When shot from off his horse fell this brave hero, we long lament his loss in the wheels of sorrow. The French began to break, their lines were flying. Wolfe seemed to revive, whilst he lay a-dying. He lifted up his head, while the cannons rattled, and to his army said, I'll go with you in battle. His aide-de-camp replied, 'Tis in our favor. Quebec and all of her pride, nothing can save her. She falls into our hands with all her treasure. Oh, then replied brave Wolfe, I die with pleasure. Oh, then replied brave Wolfe, I die contented. Strange news is come to town, strange it over to the chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, and thank you for coming out.
Thank you indeed.
A little appreciation
Well,
for you
thank you
coming
so
out.
much. Thank you.
Wonderful presentation, and
Thank you, Peter, and thank you to Rusty. Got it right? Thank you to the
He's
Reverend
got it.
Rusty. Thank you so much,
All right,
everyone.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
You say that engineering too, so. Are you gonna just tell me
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're done. If everybody wants to hop up and grab some more food, what's up?
Take the centerpiece home, yes.
Take the centerpiece home. Don't forget about the centerpieces. Come on, Joe, take the centerpiece.
They moved their stuff when they set up the tripod they originally set up there, and then they moved it there.
I saw her at Fort Wagner. She mentioned, I was thinking, and then she said about Rusty.
I have a sample of the book downloaded. I was gonna buy it, but for some reason I couldn't. But I will.
I'll be going to Fort Wagner. I'm gonna start taking, I'll be back. I gotta start taking